Hello, welcome to Seek Truth, Speak Truth. I'm doing something a little bit different today. This here is Akenham Church. This was a place that I used to come during my childhood a lot, and basically I'm going to do a new series where I'll go around my county of Suffolk showing you places of interest, places of history, and just places where I grew up. Let's do it. I used to come here so much as a boy to play, and at the time kids running about having fun, and I never ever realised the actual history that exists at this one little church. This solitary grave was the centre of huge controversy in 1878. Joseph Ramsey was buried here unbaptised. It was national news for a year and ended with the laws in England being changed to allow unbaptised children to be buried within the church grounds. Akenham Church is only 4 miles from Ipswich town centre. It stands as a lonely sentinel on raised ground almost a mile from the nearest thoroughfare. At the end of a muddy track where fields stretch into the countryside, it looks as if life passes it by. The church is, for example, where Sir Edward Walgrave was laid to rest, chief advisor to Queen Mary I. It was also involved in the Burial Reformation Act, after a 2-year-old child, Joseph Ramsey, was apparently denied a Christian burial by the Reverend Drury, a clergyman known for preaching hellfire and damnation from the pulpit. Joseph's gravestone can still be seen in the north of the churchyard, a short life that led to a change in the law when a legal dispute broke out over whether or not an unbaptised child of a nonconformist family could be buried with a service in a Church of England graveyard. The scandal led to a change in the burial law of England in 1880, and a greater level of acceptance in burial practices and guaranteed access to consecrated ground with or without the services of any Christian church or denomination. Akenham, otherwise known as St Mary's, is a Grade 2 listed building. Parts date back to the medieval period from the 13th century. The tower was built in the next century, and more additions and alterations followed in the 15th century. Going back to my childhood and the time that I spent here, I will always remember a story from my dad. Him and some older members of my family had gone up there. There's local legends. Supposedly if you run round the church 13 times anti-clockwise, you will release the devil. And funnily enough, I actually laid next to the very grave to compare how tall people are compared to say 300 or 400 years ago, and I didn't realise I was actually laying next to the devil's grave. This just felt so surreal. I've spoken previously in videos of mine and I actually have an inherent fear of death, and actually this helped me a little bit today. It kind of literally grounded me. Now I know, of course, it is highly unlikely that the devil does reside within that cracked tomb. Word quickly spread in the early 1900s, as it would back then, that the devil had indeed been awoken with the burial of the unbaptized child. I think this may be where Queen Mary I's advisor was buried, but I cannot be certain. Is there anybody that can read this? I would love if somebody could come forwards and tell me what this says. I have no idea. Looks very royal to me. Found these old screws for the actual door. So what someone has done is they've come down here, taken these out as they go, hoping that they can get in through that panel. Luckily they didn't. In 1940, a German bomber returning from a foray over a Midland city dumped the rest of its load here before the hazardous crossing of the North Sea. A mine actually hit Akenham Church directly, wrecking the building. It remained derelict until the 1960s, where the energy and enthusiasm of the local people and the resources of the Friends of Friendless Churches rescued the building and restored it to use. Although no longer an active church, I'm sure for many, many generations to come, this will be a place of wonder and amazement for young and old.